everyone, and welcome to episode number 36 of The Fourth Wall. I'm, of course, your host, Griffin Schiller, and this is the show where we break down the fourth wall of the film industry as we get an inside look through our conversations with industry professionals ranging from actors, writers, directors, you name it. This show is, of course, part of the Playlist Podcast Network, where you can find the rest of our shows such as Be Real, the Playlist Podcast, and so much more. Whatever your fix is, we definitely have you covered over there. It's not very often I can say this, but today's guest is an Academy Award winner. Yes, I am very honored to say that I had the privilege of chatting with Academy Award winner Alicia Vikander for David Lowery's The Green Knight. Before even turning 30, Alicia Vikander had already starred in the sci-fi thriller Ex Machina, which really made her someone to keep an eye on, especially in the indie space. She teamed up with Matt Damon in Jason Bourne and was in pre-production as the lead in the reboot for the action franchise Tomb Raider. And of course, she won the Academy Award for her incredible performance in The Danish Girl. Whether it has the 3 projects she has coming out this year, her marriage to fellow actor and former co-star Michael Fassbender, or time spent enjoying life's simplest pleasures, Vikander remains one of the busiest and most underrated gems in the industry. Continuing to showcase her range, she switches gears here for her latest film, the highly anticipated A24 movie, The Green Knight. Now, The Green Knight is based on the poem and Arthurian legend Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and this medieval fantasy follows Dev Patel as Sir Gawain, the nephew of King Arthur, as he goes on an epic quest in pursuit of the Green Knight. The film challenges many themes laced in lore, such as honor, nobility, questions of identity, and worthiness to become a legend, and Vikander might have my favorite scene in the entire film. She plays dual roles here as Essel and the Lady, and the latter of which is a role where she's treated to a show-stopping monologue that truthfully might have been my favorite sequence out of the entire film. And what made that monologue on the color green, as you'll see when you watch the film, so special is that it was a monologue, a soliloquy that David Lowery wrote himself. It wasn't part of the initial poem. And so Alicia and I talked about the fact that David was not only adapting, but he was expanding upon, writing on something that has been studied by scholars and doctors across history. And in case you didn't know, one of Alicia Vikander's favorite films is The Princess Bride, which got us talking about the magic of 80s fantasy films, the tangibility, the attention to detail, why we haven't really been able to recapture that particular magic until really with David Lowery's The Green Knight. And obviously, if you've been listening to interviews with David Lowery, you'll know that that was a particular period of time that he wanted to draw upon for influences for this particular film. And something that I didn't know going into this was that Alicia Vikander herself is a massive fantasy fan, and so we sort of talk about her relationship with the genre in general, stemming from her father growing up. And of course, you know me, big espionage lover, big James Bond fan. I had to bring up her amazing role in Guy Ritchie's incredibly underrated Man from U.N.C.L.E. film, and we kind of talked about that a little bit towards the end, her memories of it, whether or not there might be a sequel, and so much more. We even touch on Ex Machina at some point in this conversation. It was absolutely delightful. Alicia Vikander is not only an incredible talent, she is a genuine, kind, and thoughtful person, and I really, really appreciated this conversation. And again, so thankful that I was able to talk to her about this incredible film, which is by far one of my favorites of the year. But before we dive into this thing, be sure to jump down in the comment section of wherever you're listening to this episode and let us know what your favorite Alicia Vikander film is. She has an incredible resume of films, so there's plenty to choose from across multiple genres, but we want to hear about that down in the comments section below. And again, be sure to subscribe to the Playlist Podcast Network so you don't miss out on more episodes of The Fourth Wall. I have one coming out next week with James Gunn, but we'll get to that at a later point. A24's The Green Knight hits theaters this Friday, July 30th, and I'm sure many of you are anticipating it, rightfully so. It lives up to the hype, and then some. But enough from me. Let's get into this thing. Let's talk about the greatness of The Green Knight with Alicia Vikander. Alicia, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you? Or afternoon, morning where you are.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. It would be different depending. I'm in LA, so morning here. But anyways, yeah, I was super stoked about this because I think that for as incredible of a visual film as this is, and for as much as I love Arthurian lore, the thing that I kind of walked away from this film just being in awe of was your performance, and specifically the section where you're talking about the color green. I think that was such an incredible monologue in and of itself, and I'm wondering if we could sort of start there with that monologue and sort of like your preparation for it, what your first reaction was to reading that, because I do think it gets to the heart of the movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, so I'm a huge fan of David. I mean, I met him before this script was sent to me by him, and I just knew that if he would ask me to come and work with him one day, I would love to.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would send me the script, and it was this. He was like, yeah, there was this clear kind of mirror. He didn't tell me what role to read for,
Yeah.
And I come, I'll come and join you for a few days. And he was like, it was this clear mirror aspect between these characters. And then he did ask me in the end if I wanted to play both. And then, yes, but then this poem kind of came in the second draft, actually.
Oh, okay.
And then I just phoned him up and I was like, wow. I was like, it's pretty incredible, and it just doesn't. Now it's a daunting, thing from the start to, wanting to adapt this, poem that doctors and people have, analyzed and written essays about for years. And I think he had done such an incredible job, writing this script. And then I was like, and then you dare to match it up by showing what a great poet you are. Too,
yeah. Yeah.
And which, I also said, it kind of just sums up what the film is in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
And I knew it was a treat, and I knew that I wanted to, of course, honor it as much as I wanted to show how much I loved it.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible, because I had no idea that was, because I'm very loosely familiar with the original poem, so getting to that section and whatnot, I just assumed, because of how well written it was and how well matched up with everything, that was originally just part of the poem.
David pulling that off,
Yeah. That's very interesting.
So yeah, no, I mean, that's all to him. He's a brilliant visualist and filmmaker. He's incredibly talented, and he's an intellectual. And that's also why I love in making this film, because he dares to go there. I mean, we've seen, of course, that like these poems from back in the ages. I mean, they're the reasons we have all films ever made about the knights around the round table. But he kind of dares to embrace the fact that it's the 700-year-old poem, and the kind of intellectual depth and the questioning about morality that's in there, but then dares to make it his own and make it then also feel like a big adventure movie. And it has the horses and the creatures and the forests and the talking animals and all those things. And I was so intrigued already when he described this project to me, that he said, and he's, I think he told me, I don't know, that he had I don't know how many times he had read the poem himself, but I bet it was a lot of times.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think what you just said there about it kind of, putting a new spin on a centuries old story such as this is how it almost functions as this this deconstruction or like reflection on like legend, nobility, celebrity to an extent. Now, I'm kind of curious how you yourself view that idea.
It's interesting. One thing that happened when I did that scene when Essel says to going like, why greatness? Why is goodness not enough? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you know, because it is a coming of age story, and I think, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's also just one thing of growing up. You know, I remember when I was 20, you know, maybe I was a bit blind. I had a bit hard to understand. Why wouldn't you want everything?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like,
yeah.
And which I now look back and I admire. It's also a naive but also romantic view of seeing the world, you know, and myself and what I wanted to do. And it took me on a whirlwind of a journey and life. But I also learned, you know, I think I was judgmental sometimes, or I was. There was people when I could say, but why would you not want all, you know?
Yeah.
And then I remember, you know, how these people could say, like, you wait, you know, it's not like that, you know, it's not that you don't, you know, it's just another thing. And now I find myself in my garden, like potting around and like, you know, cooking food, like doing other things in life. And I'm like, this makes me so happy, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not, you know, and it's just about, you know, and then I totally understand that some people earlier in my life, they were probably more content than I was, you know? And that is one thing, you know, that I think, and that kind of, you know, popped up in my head whilst I was making it. And I was like, wow, this young woman, Ethel, she's pretty impressive. I mean, she's clearly, you know, I don't know if anyone would put her, you know, just because she's low class, but she's definitely not simple. I mean, she's lived enough to know some of the most profound truths in this film.
Yeah, I think that's what I really liked about her, because I mean we get like the two instances, right? We get you as Essel, and then we get you as the lady later on. But there is sort of an interesting interconnectivity between the two of them, and it's like because this is primarily, you know, Gawain's journey. You know, Dev is on the screen for most of the time, but I think the moments that you get stand out the most because of just like how integral they are to Gawain's development as a character, you know, in both instances.
Yeah. And that thing of like, you know, of course I didn't have to think about so much the resemblance of it, because of course I'm playing both of them, but you know, it's that thing when I did it, and also seeing Dev's, you know, the different reactions that he clearly had, of course, when he played with the lady, and that thing of when the grass is always greener on the other side, you know, you kind of forget, or you choose to forget, that something that was right in front of you, next to you at home, was what you said you seeked for, but never really noticed, you know?
Yeah. So is that sort of how you view their interconnectivity, you would say?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, quite, you know, not a very hidden one. I think it's, you know,
right.
Yeah, I think it's definitely there, just because it's, you know, I remember it's this moment when he sees the lady the first time, and it's like, you know, does he choose to not see the resembler, or he can't? But it's like a little mini double take when he sees her the first time, you know, which is, you know, no, I think it just, you know, with all these poems or stories that have lost throughout the ages, I would say there's a lot of, you know, with fairy tales, it's these big questions and you know, about life and morality, and that mirror image was just another one of the layers that I think David put into his film that makes you be able to read or see things throughout the film in your own different way, you know, read into whatever feels right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess sort of just on that topic of like these big mythic tales and you know, poems of old and stuff like that. Do you like how much of a fan of that particular genre were you? Because I know David was a big like Arthurian lore guy, and that's sort of what drew him into this project. But was that necessarily the case for you?
I grew up with a dad who's a huge sci-fi and fantasy fan.
Oh, okay.
So I did grow up with Tolkien at about age 10. So,
okay, there you go.
Not the film, but the books. So, you know, so yes, and I loved it, you know, and he was the one who kind of gave me tips of, you know, but so yes, I've always loved that kind of I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the magical world, the escapism, the fantasies. I think, I read books a lot when I was a kid, and it was probably even before movies, that thing of like all the, magical worlds that I created in my head, which I love to escape to.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious because this film referenced a lot of like that particular kind of movie that came out in the 80s. And I think it's important to sort of distinguish, those kind of films from other fantasy films because they did have this unique sort of like magic and feel to them. And I'm curious for you because I also read that you're a big fan of The Princess Bride. He has a special place in your heart and stuff. So I'm kind of curious for you as someone who grew up with those movies, who is a fan of this genre, especially. What do you think made the films of that era of the 80s in this particular genre so special? I guess when you compare it to other eras.
I think it's just about embracing it. I think it's about, not trying to, I think be as open as so I guess now when I said it myself, like when I was a kid, it's like I had such vivid memories of the magic of the world that I created in my own head were like, they were endless. I dreamt about them and, thought about these characters. And I think, you kind of have to have almost a child's kind of openness to the magic itself for it to work. And I think with the best, if it's sci-fi or fantasies or even, like a universe like Star Wars, it's like then, or Harry Potter, why Harry Potter worked, and I grew up with those books too, was because it's down to detail. Like it doesn't take the easy way out. Everything needs to be there. And that is also something I really got impressed by, with David, how all the departments, it doesn't have a huge budget, but he knew he was going to make something that he can't help, that is something with a smaller budget like this is going to stand next to, other fantasy movies, which have budgets that are colossal in comparison. Or when I did Ex Machina, it's the same thing. It didn't have any money, but people are going to put it next to other sci-fi movies and see, but it needs to look right. But if you do it so particular down to detail that, everything is done with precision and you buy the whole world and everything that is in it, then I think it feels complete and you dare to believe in the fantasy. I don't know, maybe.
No, I think that's I think that's an incredibly well-made point, because those movies do have that attention to detail that you don't necessarily see. I mean, I think there's also something to be said about the practicality, right? And David certainly does that with this movie. I mean, the amount of, I mean, even someone like the Green Knight, who, in another film probably would have been a CGI monster or something like that. The fact that it is, this prosthetic suit and everything like that is incredible. And there is that tangibility. I think there is something very true to what you were saying about you can feel it, right? It's easy to immerse yourself into the world because of that attention to detail.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that with CGI too, or I'm thinking even what he did. I mean, I saw with makeup was incredible. The Green Knight. And then it's also part of, giving the actors getting to step into that world as well and react to it for real. And then, the same thing with, making Baby Yoda too. It's like, or even Ex Machina. I mean, why they won the Oscar was because I was almost the prosthetics. It was, if you see what they actually did, it was the least possible that they could do with CGI. That was their mission, and that brings a certain organic feel to it that I think us humans respond to. It feels real, even if it's crafted with technology as well. It's something that really feels like it's not cheaply done, or it's not cheap, but not the easy way out. There's a lot of our history that has gone into it.
No, for sure. And I'm really glad you brought up the point about Ex Machina, because that's one of those Oscars that I always go back to, and I'm like, I don't think people understand how deserved that the visual effects Oscar was.
That night, that was my tears came. That's for real.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it was a very surreal night for me in general. But I stood in the green room and they won, and then I got super touched because I was like, "There's no one here that deserves that more than them." It was so impressive what they did.
Yeah. Absolutely, I agree. So kind of shifting away from Green Knight here a little bit as we start to wrap up here. One of my favorite films of yours, and one of the films that I find to be one of the most underrated within like the past 10 years or so, is Guy Ritchie's Man from U.N.C.L.E. And I'm always saddened that it never ignited a franchise, and that it never, I guess, caught on the way that it did. But there is like a cult following for it, and so I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit about maybe just your experience making that movie, why you think it largely flew under the radar, and if there is more there to sort of explore, if sequels could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of years have now passed, and who knows? I mean, it was. I think partly, we live in a world where IPs are so, have a lot of meaning, and of course, Man from U.N.C.L.E. for most people under a certain age, didn't know what that was. Kind of including me. I think I'd read it or seen it, and I'd myself go back and look at it. But I think it was a brilliant idea because I too think I love that world. Maybe it's also, my parents were young in the early 60s. Like, I grew up romanticizing. I mean, I threw a pair of flower power pants when I was like 10. Because I wanted to be like that.
I love that. Yeah.
But it's like, and I make like flowers in my hair, and like, but that was of course a bit later, 60s. But it's that kind of era, especially. And I mean, what got together with, I mean, the costumes are pretty spectacular, and it's what I like is, of course, we have Bond, but Bond has also over the years kind of transitioned to another genre than maybe in the beginning, and I kind of love that it kind of brought up this more kind of poppy, cheeky, fun 60s vibe that you saw in a lot of films back then, and it kind of, it dared to go all the way and embrace that, and embrace that it is a bit over the top, but I mean, I would have loved to make another one. It was some of the most fun I've had shooting that film.
Yeah, and everyone I've talked to who has worked with Guy Ritchie has just said that he is such just this incredible presence on set, and this unbelievably, similar to David, someone who's just a visionary, who has like the precise like look and feel of the movie in his head while he's shooting it. So I have to imagine that collaboration was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, no, he came to set and said exactly what he imagined, and no, I think it was just an easy fun shoot, which is not very often on those big films,
Yeah.
It seems like I heard someone told me at the studio that it's been one of those films that apparently have been downloaded a lot, and people have seen it at home. So if that's all you care about. If people haven't seen it and enjoyed it, and if people have, if it took them 5 years, 7 years to see it, then that's fine, as long as they had a good time.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely one of those ones that is caught on. I more people seem to find it, I guess, over the years, which is encouraging to, I guess, someone like me who's a fan of that, and just in seeing people discover it and whatnot. But listen, Alicia, I am out of time, but I really thank you so much for your time, and I absolutely loved The Green Knight. It is it's a film I have been thinking about for a long time, and will probably continue to think about. So yeah.
That's cool. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah, for sure.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.